The moment they approached you, confidence oozing from every pore, you saw right through the facade. While everyone else catered to their ego, you responded differently, calm, collected, impossible to read. You didn't chase, you didn't falter, you stood your ground with a quiet power they'd never encountered before. When they tried their usual tactics, the ones that had others wrapped around their finger in minutes, you simply smiled. Now, they're completely thrown off balance, utterly fascinated by the one person they couldn't manipulate or decode. You handled them like no one else ever has, and it's driving them wild with desire for the person they never figured out. They're used to people getting hooked, entangled in their drama, wrapped up in emotional knots that they control like a puppeteer. They push just enough to get a rise, then retreat, then return with just enough affection to keep the cycle going. It's a carousel of confusion, but when they tried it with you, the ride came to a halt. You stepped off, you didn't play the part, and now they're the ones spinning, dizzy with confusion. Your silence disarmed them, your neutrality cut through their manipulation like a blade. You refused to hand them the ammunition they needed to justify their own dysfunction, and that, more than anything, enraged them. Because without your reaction, they're stuck, holding the mirror, left alone with their tactics, their intentions, their projections, unable to pin any of it on you. Now, they're scrambling, not outwardly. On the surface, they're pretending to be fine. But beneath it, they're unraveling. Why didn't you react? Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you beg or cling or lash out? That question loops through their mind like static. You didn't give them what they needed to fuel the story they were trying to tell, and without a villain, they don't know how to play the victim. They're confused because your energy doesn't fit their pattern. They can't grasp you, can't provoke you, can't label you, and the human mind hates what it can't define. That's why they're obsessed. That's why they keep circling back mentally. They can't find a container big enough to hold your essence, and it's driving them mad. You've broken their cycle, shattered their system, and now you exist in their mind like a ghost, untouchable, unknowable, unbothered. They wanted to provoke you, but all they provoked was your silence, and in that silence, they lost their power. You cut the cord, but in their mind, it never happened. They've created a version of you, a character in a fantasy that serves their need for control and connection. They're not just remembering the past, they're rewriting it. They're out there telling people you're together, not metaphorically, literally. They're spinning stories of romantic reunions, whispered proposals, secret plans for the future. These aren't misunderstandings. They're fabrications, crafted illusions to keep you alive in their narrative, even after you've stepped out of the scene. They can't bear the silence you've left behind, so instead of sitting with it, they're trying to replace it with noise. Stories they control, fantasies they project, lies they tell with such conviction others might actually believe them. To your community, to mutual friends, even to strangers, they're telling tales of love that never existed, agreements you never made. They're clinging to a version of reality where you're still theirs, still interested, still lingering in the background, waiting to come back. But the truth is, you left, and they can't let go. This isn't about love, this is about ownership. They don't miss you, they miss the feeling of having someone orbit around their ego. And since they can't have you physically, they'll try to control how others see you. That's the new battleground. Your name, your reputation, your image. If they can't reach you directly, they'll try to distort the space around you. They're banking on ignorance, counting on others not asking questions. They're hoping people will simply absorb the fiction without fact-checking the reality. Look, you already know the game is rigged, and if you're paying attention, you know the walls are closing in. So, let's talk about what we're doing about it. When you live by the day at the market's command, where profit and property rule the land, to be heard, to be held, to be dealt a fair hand, these are the things that a people demand. And we hear you. The Obsidian Inner Order has paywalls, yes, those who stand with us, who fuel this mission. They give us ammunition to fight the Archons, to push back against the machine. to go deeper, to uncover more. And as our thank you, paid members get access to a 1-hour live, personalized, weekly group tarot reading, guidance, insight, and clarity for the road ahead. But kicking a man for being down on the floor, that's something we cannot ignore. That's why, starting today, you can steal the Astral Atom exclusive daily newsletter for free. No paywall, no catch. Just join the Patreon free tier, link in the description. This is the start of our conversation with you, and it's bi-directional. You can reply to any email we send you. We'll read it, we'll hear you, and we'll do our best to get an answer to you from the universe itself. If you can support, we need you. If you can't, take what's free. The Obsidian Inner Order is open now. Let's get back to work. They want to isolate you, confuse the people around you. They want your own community to look at you with suspicion, to question your decisions, to wonder if you're the unstable one. It's not just projection, it's invasion. They're inserting themselves into your life through the words of others, hoping that if they can't control your choices, they can at least taint the environment in which you live them. But none of it is real. Not the stories, not the supposed intimacy, not the imagined reconciliation. It's a desperate attempt to hold on to a connection that no longer exists. And because you've withdrawn your energy, they're using fantasy as a substitute. These falsehoods are not reflections of you. They're mirrors of their own refusal to accept reality. The truth is, they've been left behind, and instead of facing the emptiness, they've filled it with delusion. They want people to see you as theirs. They want the world to believe there's still something there, but the only place your relationship still exists is in their mind, and even that's crumbling under the weight of your silence. You didn't just walk away, you shattered a pattern, one they've relied on for years. They thrive on control, on molding others to fit their narrative, but with you, nothing stuck. You didn't yield, you didn't conform, you didn't perform for their approval or bow to their chaos. You were still, you were sovereign, you were a force they couldn't bend, and that truth tore something open inside them. They call you cold now, aloof, maybe even psychopathic, but that's projection. What they really mean is that you didn't collapse. You didn't feed their hunger for drama disguised as love, and they can't stand it. You were calm in moments they engineered to create panic. You were silent in places where most people scream. That control over your own emotions, that self-containment, it burns them because it means you don't belong to them, not even a little. You may be neurodivergent or highly intuitive, and that makes you dangerous to them because you see things. You sense energy shifts, decode motives, and pierce through the mask before it even settles. You weren't swept up in the fantasy because your mind doesn't chase illusions. It tracks patterns, and the pattern was clear from the start. Manipulation, charm, emotional whiplash. You didn't need time to understand it, you knew. And worse, you reflected it. You weren't brought into their life to be conquered. You were Kerberos sent as a mirror, a spiritual disruptor. Your presence alone dragged their shadows into the light, and for someone who survives by hiding behind charisma and illusion, that exposure is unbearable. They didn't want to see themselves. They wanted someone who would submit. Instead, they met someone who didn't flinch at the monster behind the smile, and they can't unsee what you showed them. That's why they're both drawn to you and repulsed by you. You didn't just deny them control, you returned it to them in a form they can't handle. You made them responsible for the parts of themselves they try to bury, and now they can't decide if they want to punish you or possess you. Both, probably. Because the truth is, they were desperate for someone like you. Someone who wouldn't fall. Someone who would hold the line. Someone who would challenge their fantasy. But now that you've done it, they hate you for it. Not because you were cruel, but because you were unshakably true. You didn't become who they wanted. You stayed who you were, and in that refusal, they saw everything they're not. You triggered the very wound they've spent their whole life trying to escape, and that's why they'll never forget you. You weren't placed in their life to fall for them. You were placed there to see them. Not the persona, not the story, not the carefully curated mask, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who they are beneath it all. You didn't get swept away by the charm or the chaos. You stood still long enough to witness the soul behind the spectacle, and that's what unsettled them the most. Because when someone is built on illusion, to be truly seen is a kind of death. Spiritually, you were sent as a witness, not a victim, not a lover, a guide. You were never meant to entangle yourself in their dysfunction. You were meant to reflect it back to them. You held up the mirror, not out of malice, but out of alignment. And in that mirror, they saw the truth they've been running from for years. The manipulator, the projection artist, the emotional puppeteer. They saw their shadow, and they hated you for it. They mistook your empathy for attachment, your observation for longing, but you were never there to be consumed. You were there to observe, to stand in your power while they played out their scripts. And when they realized you weren't clinging, weren't hoping, weren't playing along, the panic set in. Because if you saw them and still didn't stay, what does that say about who they really are? Your soul didn't agree to the game, and they can't cope with that kind of defiance. They're used to controlling the narrative, casting themselves as the tragic hero or the misunderstood romantic. But you didn't follow the script. You saw behind the scenes, you heard the offstage whispers, you noticed the inconsistencies, and you didn't play along. That's why they're scrambling to rewrite the story now, to flip the roles, to paint you as the villain, the cold one, the problem. But no matter how many edits they make, your stillness holds too much truth. You were never cruel. You were honest. You didn't expose them to others. You let them expose themselves. You simply watched, without rescuing or reacting. And that act alone was enough to make them unravel. Because no one's ever held space like that before. No one's ever looked them in the eye without flinching, without trying to fix, without trying to run. You stayed until the truth became unbearable, and then you walked. They're haunted by that. Haunted by your knowing. Haunted by the fact that you saw them completely and chose not to engage. You didn't lose control, you held power. And now, no matter what they say, they know you were the one who saw them clearly. And that kind of seeing, it can't be undone. They couldn't control you directly, so now they're trying to reach you sideways. Through whispers, through back doors, through the people you know and trust. You may not see them standing at your door, but make no mistake, they're still trying to infiltrate your life. This isn't about closure or care. This is a covert campaign to distort your surroundings, manipulate perception, and tether themselves to your energy any way they can. They're contacting your friends, messaging your family, sliding into conversations with coworkers under the guise of concern or regret. But every word is strategically placed, carefully selected to plant seeds of confusion and control. They're spinning tales of heartbreak, longing, or worse, claiming you left them shattered, painting themselves as the abandoned soul who only ever wanted love. It's not an apology, it's a performance, and the audience is everyone around you. Their goal is simple, to make others see you through their lens. If they can't have you, they want to distort how you're perceived. They're trying to attach their name to yours in people's minds, clinging to a false narrative that keeps you intertwined. It's not just obsession, it's branding. They want the mention of your name to come with a story they wrote, not the truth you lived. They're trying to anchor themselves in your reality through lies, stories of reconciliation, fabricated texts, distorted timelines. They're rewriting the past and inserting themselves into your present. And while they can't touch you directly, they believe they can still alter the environment you walk through. If they can't get to your mind, they'll try to pollute your atmosphere. But here's what they don't understand. You've already detached. No matter how many people they contact, no matter how much fiction they spin, they still can't reach you. Your essence is sealed off. Your boundaries are energetic and absolute. Their words might circulate, but your energy remains sovereign, untouched. This desperation is their unraveling. They don't realize that every story they tell, every message they send, every lie they plant, It all reveals more about them than it ever could about you. The people who truly know you aren't fooled, and the ones who are, they were never meant to walk with you in the first place. They think they're influencing perception, but what they're really doing is proving your silence was justified. Every move they make behind the scenes only confirms what you already knew. They were never operating in good faith. And now, with nothing left to control, they're spiraling through manipulation dressed as mourning. They can try to taint your name, but they'll never access your truth. They can try to reclaim your image, but they'll never hold your essence. You are beyond their reach, and that's the one thing they'll never be able to accept. This wasn't chaos for the sake of pain. It was a divine setup designed to crack you open and crown you in the process. What looked like destruction was actually elevating you. You weren't brought into this dynamic to lose yourself. You were placed there to reclaim yourself. Every trigger, every betrayal, every illusion was orchestrated by a higher intelligence to pull you out of the role you were never meant to play. You've spent years being the scapegoat, the overgiver, the one who absorbs blame just to keep the peace. You've been trained by trauma, by survival, by culture, to over-explain, to shrink, to carry other people's chaos as your own. And this person, they were the final test, the storm that forced you to choose yourself fully and without apology. They came with seductive illusions and manipulative charm, not to ruin you, but to reveal you. This connection was an initiation, a spiritual fire designed to burn away false identity. They weren't just a toxic person. You were their spiritual mirror. And through their madness, you remembered your clarity. Through their distortion, you reclaimed your intuition. Through their hunger, you found your boundaries. You stopped internalizing guilt, stopped questioning your truth, stopped diluting your power to make others feel comfortable. You began to embody your essence, not in theory, but in practice. You started saying no, not just to them, but to everything they represented: chaos, dependency, illusion, control. You broke the pattern. You didn't just walk away, you evolved. And now your energy is different, potent, aligned, uncompromising. And they feel it. They sense that you're no longer accessible, no longer tethered to the games they play, and that realization haunts them more than your absence ever could. Your presence now breaks illusions. It doesn't bend. It doesn't soothe manipulation. It doesn't entertain delusion. And that's exactly why they fear you and crave you. You are no longer a source of supply. You are a spiritual force. What they tried to drain has now become divine. You're being reshaped from the inside out, not as a reaction to their chaos, but as a return to your original self. They thought they were writing your story, but they were only an unfinished chapter. The divine is now the author, and this new arc isn't about healing them or proving your worth. It's about remembering that you were always the seer, never the scapegoat, always the one sent to observe, not to be consumed. And because you passed this test, not with rage, not with revenge, but with restraint, you're being elevated spiritually, energetically, entirely. This was never about them. It was always about you. They will never approach you in truth, not now, not ever, because honesty was never their intention, manipulation was. And now that their tactics have failed, what remains is a slow unraveling of everything they once used to keep control. Their games don't work on you, and worse for them, they've stopped working on others too. What once felt powerful now feels pathetic, even to those who once enabled it. This was never about love. It was obsession camouflaged as affection, entitlement masked as concern. And the more they reach, the more they're blocked, spiritually, energetically, and socially. God has placed a wall between you and every hand that seeks to extract your light without honoring it. That wall is protection. That wall is justice. Their lies are backfiring, their manipulation exposed. What they thought would isolate you is now isolating them. People are starting to notice the inconsistencies, the desperation, the pattern. The very illusion they crafted is beginning to crumble under its own weight. And you're untouched. Because you passed the test, not by retaliating, but by standing still. Now the elevation begins. The people meant for you are arriving. The doors meant for you are opening. And the ones who came to misuse your energy are being spiritually evicted. You're not being hidden. You're being positioned. Positioned for peace, for purpose, for power. Divine justice doesn't scream. It arrives silently with perfect timing. They've lost access to you, and they always will. They cast a spell to control your narrative, but it turned on them. Every word they spoke, every story they told became a trap. They walked into themselves. What they didn't anticipate was how your silence would become sacred, how your spiritual team would rise, not just to protect you, but to exalt you. That's the word vibrating in the ether now, deified. You're no longer just protected, you're being honored in realms they'll never reach. You saw without reacting, you knew without proving, and because of that, your presence has become something beyond comprehension. You were never meant to be reachable, you were meant to be revered. And now you are. There's more coming, more truth, more elevation, more revelation. But for now, sit in the knowing. You are untouchable. They will never reach you again. And that's exactly how it was always meant to be.